Just over a year ago, Me Too blew through the world's workplaces, setting off a global reckoning. Employees spoke outward, and employers looked inward, and the rules about what was permissible versus what was untenable changed the global landscape of work. The uprising came from every corner, from the red carpets of Hollywood to the television studios to factories and restaurants, hotels and government. It's true that workplaces are still grappling with how to handle sexual harassment, how it gets called out, who gets punished and how, and what are the opportunities for redemption. But the past year has made clear two key points. One, sexual harassment disproportionately affects women. And two, its definition extends well beyond physical attacks to encompass a number of damaging psychological states. The case against sexual harassment is first and foremost a human, if not a moral one. But there is also a clear business case for ending sexual harassment in the workplace. The effects of harassment, independent of their inherently exploitative nature, have been shown to reduce productivity and increase absenteeism, directly affecting a company's bottom line. It's also clear that tackling sexual harassment in the workplace is crucial to the larger landscape of societal progress. Governments can no longer turn a blind eye to such bad practices in their companies' businesses.
So, whose responsibility it is to ensure it's eradicated once and for all? Business or governments? Is change more effective at the macro or micro level? Is corporate growth, with all its practices, the best way of achieving societal growth? Or does policy come first? We are joined today by two teams who will be addressing this question head-on with the motion, "This House believes that government, not business, should be primarily responsible for ending sexual harassment in the workplace."
On the for team.
Where's the for team? Wave?
Wave. Okay. On the for team that will affirm the motion, this House believes that government, not business, should be primarily responsible for ending sexual harassment in the workplace. We're joined by Katja Iversen of Women Deliver. You can raise your hand. This is challenging work. Please give them lots of encouragement. Katja Iversen of Women Deliver. Mary Frances Wain of National Women's Law Centre. And Michael Kaufman of White Ribbon Campaign.
On the against team, wave. Arguing that business, not government, should be primarily responsible for ending sexual violence in the workplace, we are joined by Mercedes Colwin of Gordon Rees. Our only Frenchman, Philippe Lévesque of Care France. And Heather Barnabe of Girls 20. Warning, Heather Barnabe has an edge because she's got Girls 20 behind her. All right, so the team will alternate speakers, with the first pair having up to 3.5 minutes each for opening comments. They'll come here at the front. For, against, in case you're not sure what people are arguing. For, against. The second and third pair will each have the same time, 3.5 minutes, to react and respond.
We also have a jury. We have Leah Daughtry of On These Things.
Leah?
There she is. We have Anne-Laure Kichel of Rothschild. And we have Alexandra Polt of L'Oréal. Each jury member will have up to 3 minutes to reflect on the arguments after all the debaters have spoken. Jury members, we encourage you to be frank and critical or approving in your comments on the arguments, but we ask you to stop short of declaring a winner, because declaring a winner is up to you, our audience. I know, it's exciting. Finally, one member from each team will take the floor for a 1.5-minute closing rebuttal before we move to the audience to vote. I will provide, well, actually, Sophie and I will provide hand signals to warn debaters when you have 30 seconds left, and when the time expires, we'll give you a verbal cutoff. I'm sure you can appreciate that we want to be sure that both sides are fully and fairly represented in the time that we have.
Before we start, I would like to add that despite the deeply serious nature of this issue, this debate is supposed to be fun. I think Katja got it already. She's in the spirit. It's not so much about it's not so much about being judged on one's belief and thinking, but rather an exercise of putting oneself in someone else's shoes, in recognizing the importance of challenging one's own position and sympathizing with another. Important. Having said this, we're going to step back and we're going to invite the first team to come at the front for the first opening statement. Three and a half minutes, starting. Who starts first? Okay.
Bonjour, distinguished colleagues. Sexual harassment is a global threat to gender equity, human rights, and the capacity for individuals, communities, and nations to realize prosperity and their full potential. It is the primary responsibility of government to address challenges of this scale. Sexual harassment exists in all occupations and sectors in the world of work, including the public and private sectors and the formal and informal economies. Its devastating impact on the individual worker includes their security, health, and well-being mentally, physically, and financially. What's more, because women are disproportionately the victims of sexual harassment and simultaneously more likely to invest what income they have in their families and in their communities, the loss of resources and vitality extends into our societies. Sexual harassment also helps drive both the wage and the wealth gap, which systematically leaves women, and especially women of color, out of the intergenerational transfer of wealth and security, impacting not just their ability to thrive, but to survive. This loss of resources and opportunity cost measures in the billions at the country level and in the trillions for the global GDP. In addition to the scale of the challenge, the broad scope of sexual harassment requires government-driven solutions. Beyond the traditional business sector, sexual harassment is a pervasive and oppressive force in domestic, farm, and migrant work, first and emergency response work, in schools, and in gig work. It is the primary responsibility of government to set laws and policies on safe working conditions, as well as on equity and discrimination. It is the primary responsibility of government to incent business, to hold employers accountable, and to ensure compliance and enforcement. The systematic work environment management and regulation, including awareness and training protocols, and the collection of data necessary to monitor, track, and analyze sexual harassment in the workplace requires government leadership in bringing about its end. But there may still be a few among us who believe that it is up to business to do this. So let's look and see for a moment on what that market bears. Between 25% and 85% of women report facing sexual harassment at work. 71% of women who experience sexual harassment in the workplace do not report it. 40% don't have confidence that their claims would be fairly addressed if they did. Why don't workers trust their employers to take the lead in ending sexual harassment in the workplace? From our front row seat at the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, we see every day business which has fostered cultures that allow sexual harassment to exist and even thrive. Businesses have emboldened bullying, intimidation, and retaliation of those who speak up against harassment in the workplace. And businesses which have even handsomely rewarded predatory executives with outrageous severance packages and parting gifts. Time and time again, the headlines demonstrate that it is profit and not protection of people that drives the sector, unless the media shines the spotlight of shame. Sexual harassment is a global problem with a global passport. It touches us all It takes government to solve. Vote yes on the motion.
Bonjour, bon après-midi, hello to everyone, and thank you, Mary Frances, for this excellent words, but not that convincing, I must say. Our side of the house believes that business should be primarily responsible for ending sexual harassment in the workplace, and my partners and I will demonstrate it. The Me Too movement, I'm sure many of you participated in this fight, made it very evident that action is needed at all levels. There is no time to wait for governments or parliaments to pass more laws. Companies must act now. But the Me Too movement started in countries that, like the USA or my country, that already have had many laws against sexual harassment in the workplace. Many laws. Too many laws. And that hasn't achieved the purpose. I appeal to the French audience here. I'm sure you know that book. Here, they know it. This is the executive summary of the French Labor Code. 1,485 pages of executive summary. That's what we have. Too many laws not implemented. We have all these many laws, and yet 82% of French employers have not taken measures against sexual harassment in the workplace. Do you need other proofs that laws and governments are not sufficient? Then we need to do more. Then we need to act. You need to act. I need to act on the premises for which we're responsible. We need to challenge our top management, our boards, make them accountable. And I can predict that there will be class actions against companies, that there will be CEOs, more CEOs, that will be pushed to resign, that board members will be made responsible themselves if they fail to act. It is the public opinion that will change things, and the companies, but not the governments. That was exactly the same thing for child labor. We had so many laws in all our jurisdictions around the world against child labor, and yet it happened. And it's only when public opinion, the media, you, ladies and gentlemen, acted that we managed to change things, and yet we are not there yet. Therefore, if there is one avenue, maybe we don't need more laws. I know, of course, that there are still 1/3 of the countries worldwide that have nothing in their labor code against sexual harassment in the workplace. If there is one thing we need, this is maybe only one convention at the International Labour Organization to pass the first ever law against, a convention against sexual harassment in the workplace. That will be sufficient. It's more than enough to have one well-written international convention that dozens of national laws, often poorly written and usually or seldom or not enough implemented. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Can we please have the second team on each side of the argument? Thank you. Well done.
Well done.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Bonjour, tout le monde. The problem of sexual harassment is a men's problem. It is primarily men who commit these acts. And you know what? It's also men who control most companies. It is these men leading these companies who historically have not enacted effective policies, have not brought in effective training of managers and education of staff, ongoing monitoring, and real consequences for those who commit harassment, other than the occasional $90 million golden handshake. And so assuming that companies can lead the way in ending workplace sexual harassment is kind of like expecting the Pope to give you good birth control advice. It's just not going to happen. Now, let me be clear. I do welcome and I work with those male corporate leaders and managers who are champions for women's rights. Sadly, however, there are still many others who don't go beyond lip service and only enact harassment policies to legally protect themselves. I don't know about you, but I've seen these policies, and they're often pages and pages and pages of goobly-gook, rather than the nuance and the forward-moving policies and approaches to training and action that we actually do need. What's more, companies often approach harassment without a strong gender analysis. And to make matters worse, there are many companies that are still run in a completely old-school, patriarchal way, and there are many small employers who don't have the resources, don't have HR, don't have the capacity to adequately deal with these questions. In other words, we can't simply rely on goodwill by individual companies. We need to set clear national and international standards of acceptable workplace behavior. We desperately need the new ILO guidelines. These give us an international framework for governments to take action. We need our federal governments to lead our nations with a strong and unified voice and legislative frameworks to end this harassment once and for all. Now, let me say, a government response is not automatic. After all, governments are still disproportionately led by men, and yes, government offices see their share of harassment. And true, there are some countries led by men who are utterly unsympathetic to women's rights. Now, I don't want to name any particular countries, but there is one country where President Trump is effectively the harasser-in-chief. That is true. And so my point is this. My point is this. We need strong pressure from all of us. Yes, from business and civil society, from women's organizations and the media, in order for governments to take strong leadership. And only if we set national and international standards will we bring the scourge of workplace sexual harassment to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and girls 20. Let's hope the judges take popularity into account. My name's Heather Barnabe, and I believe that business, not government, is responsible for ending sexual harassment in the workplace for two key reasons. The first, government has long failed to do this, and it's been their role for some time. And second, governments are very fickle, meaning a change in government can mean a change in laws or approach. On the first point, the government has been responsible in, let's use the US as an example. This has been primarily responsible and has had a law in place for 54 years. And what's happened after 54 years? Well, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission states that 3 in 5 women report sexual harassment at some point in their career. Even worse, they estimate that up to 80% of incidents go unreported, meaning the numbers are even higher. The most common reason for not reporting is a fear of retaliation, which is fair because in a 2003 study, they found that 75% of those who had reported faced a backlash. 75%. Clearly, government and laws have not done enough. Another example of government failure to address the issue is the lack of data commissioned by governments on the issue. Sometimes it's even hard to find any data on sites that governments have. I learned that trying to prep for this debate. In my opinion, if there's no interest in collecting the data, it demonstrates that the issue is not a government priority. I think the second key point is that governments change often, and strong political will is needed to address the issue. With changes in administration, there can be changes in laws. As an example, since Trump has taken office, his administration has done the following: reversed the Department of Education's initiatives to address college sexual assault, removed research on sexual violence from the White House website, halted a Department of Labor effort to reduce sexual assault and harassment in the healthcare sector, and rolled back limits on forced arbitration for workplace sexual assault and harassment victims. I've used the US as an example, but these government failures extend everywhere. Another example, the EU and countries, lawmakers across the EU have been regularly accused of being way too slow in the reaction to the Me Too movement. And the Me Too movement is really just showing up in India now. So why should it be business? Simply put, and it's a bit unfortunate, but there is a business case for ending sexual harassment. Research shows a clear link between a company's gender equity and its financial health. By extension, focusing on eradicating sexual harassment means companies could see higher profits. I said unfortunate because I believe that things should be done from a human rights approach, but it is a pragmatic approach that would mean more equitable workplaces for men and women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have the final team? Good luck. Thank you.
You think? Should we do a face-off?
Women deliver, and a lot more than babies. And when the world delivers for women, there's a ripple effect, and everybody wins. But when a woman is living stifled, or is stifled from living her full potential, when she's hampered by sexual violence and harassment, when she can't decide on her own body, her own life, and her own future, the consequences are dire for her and for all. Violence against women and sexual harassment is one of the most pervasive human rights violations worldwide. It's a pandemic that has enormous costs for women's health, safety, and well-being, and for economies and societies at large. And we're not talking pocket change. Gender-based violence is estimated to cost countries up to 3.7% of GDP. So dealing with sexual violence and sexual harassment in the workplace is everybody's business, and it cannot be business as usual. But first and foremost, combating sexual harassment in the workplace is government's business. And we need governments across the globe, because this is a global pandemic. We need governments to step it up and say enough is enough. Governments are the duty bearers, to use human rights language, and their business, their responsibility is to protect the welfare of its people. That would never be a business's prime driver. They're here to make money. And let's get real for a second. When have we ever seen culture change come out of the private sector? Business has yet to prove that they can lead. When governments take the lead on ending sexual harassment in the workplace, it becomes clear that it is a state matter, a matter of safety, a matter of human rights, and that inaction is not an option. Governments can take it to scale rapidly. Millions and millions of people all over the world work in the public sector, and government can enforce rules and apply uniformly across the board in a way that private sector could never do. Get the laws on the books, allocate the budgets needed, and be fierce and unapologetic in implementation. Governments can be bold, comprehensive, and really implement a multi-pronged approach with initiatives focused on prevention, education, stronger protection and support, and more stringent law enforcement to hold violators to account. Add to that a robust dose of education, or public education, publicity, no tolerance, and continued focus on solution, and you have a remedy, a power remedy that only governments can mix. This could never be done, and definitely not led by businesses. It could never be as comprehensive. It could never be taken to scale. It would be piecemeal and evasive. Violence against women and sexual harassment is the plague, the pandemic of our times. It robs lives, resources, and rights. A strong, coordinated public intervention is the only thing that has worked in dealing with previous pandemics and big pandemics like diseases like the Black Plague, Ebola, and Zika. We need a government-led effort that has immediate effect and will be trend-setting, norm-changing, and ripple. Women deliver, and government will deliver for women. I urge you to vote yes.
I tripped on a wire in the green room and almost knocked her out. You now see why I should have been successful. But good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Mercedes Colwin. There are legislators out there that are very committed to ending sexual harassment. But the only way that government can be involved is through complaints. When someone comes forward and says, my rights have been aggrieved. But why is that so problematic in this realm? Because there is a strong commitment of government to eradicate sexual harassment. It's because there aren't sufficient complaints. 90% of the women who feel aggrieved, sexually harassed, and deprived in the workplace don't come forward and seek and redress their injuries at the EOC. This is an equal opportunity commission. They don't come forward. There are 3 billion individuals working globally, worldwide. 3 billion, 50%, nearly 50% of these women are women. Imagine all these individuals who feel aggrieved and don't come forward and say, I've been aggrieved, and set forth their complaint. Therefore, government can't do anything to eradicate that. And let's focus on the laws that do exist. In the United States, the laws have existed since 1964. But in 54 years, what do we have? We have only 5% of the top executive within the companies are women. 5%. Out of the Fortune 500 companies, only 24 CEOs. Only those 24 are women. It's when you look at the laws that have taken place that have been aggressive, well-meaning legislators wanting to make changes, the changes aren't happening. And when you look at the fact that you just go beyond the laws, and you look at the enforcement agencies that are set forth to enforce these laws, they're overburdened. They don't have the budgets to be able to eradicate the problems and the issues that exist. If you look at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the United States, their budget is nearly $400 million a year, but they only have 500 investigators. 500 investigators to investigate 90,000 complaints a year, which are compounded over time because those complaints add upon, add upon, add upon, add. How do 500 investigators can possibly change and enforce these laws when you're talking about how overburdened they are? But where can a change really take place? The change can come through corporate change, corporations embracing the fact that women make a significant difference in the workplace. And why do I say that? Because companies that embrace women in the workplace are known to have had innovative decisions 83% greater than other companies that don't embrace women. Companies that embrace women within the corporate boards have a 60% increase of innovative ideas. There is a bottom line financial benefit for corporations to embrace this change. Women make nearly 50% of the workforce. They're not in those top managements, but they're moving on up, and they can continue to make those changes. And corporations know time and time again that people make profits. And when people make profits and embrace the changes within, they can make that change, and ultimately we can rise to the levels that we should rise and equate to the numbers that we are in the workplace. Please vote yes. So the businesses can do and make the change and control the issue. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was amazing, wasn't it? Are we going to be tangled up in the red tape of laws, or can we rely on the men in our workplaces to solve this for us? Or maybe we should all just go home and quit. I'm joking. We would never do that.
What about asking our jury what they think of
I think
that?
we should ask the jury to come up.
Shall we invite our jury to come on stage? Please join me in welcoming our juries. So this is an act of improvisation, yes? They're not bribable. So you each have up to 3 minutes. You don't need to use them all, to just give us your comments. And as Francesca said, fall short of declaring a winner, because this is the audience job. Over to you.
Okay, so the question is, government or business? And the answer is both, en même temps. I know it's not very much in fashion. But this is not enough. It's individuals, it's not government, it's not business, it's all of us who need to act. We need to know that we can report what happens, so there needs to be a law. But there needs to be a frame, and there needs to be a place where we can report it, and typically that's a business in which we work in, for example. So it needs to be a citizen initiative. It needs to be a global initiative. It's not a nation initiative, it's not a city initiative, it's a global, worldwide initiative. We need to be able to name and to shame, because this is a power, not the government, not the business. And we need to do it, not because of bottom line, not because of GDP, not because of all of this, but just because it's our right.
Thank you.
So I try to do exactly what Sophie asked me for. So trying, that's the very German nature of my contribution, I'm sorry. So I want to tell you why both of you didn't succeed to convince me completely and where I would need an additional answer. So I think what you didn't make very clear is why, you said a lot, why should governments, why should companies, but to do what? So if it is a law that we need, yes, so why would we need another law? Everybody can say, as you, the business side said already, we have a lot of laws. So you didn't make it clear why we would need another law and what that law would say and why this law would perhaps help companies in their efforts and help society. You just said governments. The role of governments where they have really added value is about setting the rules. So what kind of rules and to help whom and how and why? So I would need an additional answer on that. I would also need an additional answer from the company side, because of course, how do we act on the issue that it's not all black or white? Companies are not all bad and not all good. So where do we need governments? And if we do not need governments for an additional law, we are not, companies are not democratically elected. So how do you manage that problem, that to a societal challenge like that, you will have to respond in an adequate way of who is going to control companies, who is going to control those who don't want, is this self-control, is this through an elected body, how is the how and the what going to look like? So I think we would need some answers on that to have then could judge you, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I also know how to follow instructions, so no, I'm a neurotic Virgo, so I just know how to follow. So I want to issue two observations to the teams, starting with the team against. If history is any indication, business and the private sector have proven unwilling or unable to address the issue. It is not clear to me from your presentation what has now changed that will suddenly make them want to fix the situation. Sexual harassment is not a new issue. It has existed for decades. The Me Too movement has just shined a light on it and emboldened women to share their stories. I am not sure what has changed in the lives of businesses that will suddenly make them want to rip the Band-Aid off and make their workplaces fair and moral. Why would they do that now? Secondly, for the FORCE team, I have the same question. Even those governments with equality offices and with enforcement activities have also found their challenges, particularly because it depends mostly on who's in office. In the United States, we've just elected 100 women to the United States Congress. That's a record. And that's wonderful. But that's 100 out of 435. So we still are in the minority when it comes to the laws and the regulations of our country. How do we ensure that government, if in fact government is the name of the work that we decide to do together, The government is what we call the work that we decide to do together. How do we ensure that the government is really acting on behalf of the people regardless of who's in office? What are the enforcement mechanisms that can be put into place that are not overly burdensome for business, that are not hard to follow, and that do not have the challenges of staffing and regulatory factors? So I guess my overall comment is, neither of you made the case for me, and I am wondering, as my colleagues, is there not a third way that creates a mechanism by which business and government work together to deal with what has been too long a problem?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to ask the 4 team to please send your chosen speaker up to the podium to give your final rebuttal.
You can stay here. Go after.
This is everybody's business. And we fully agree with the judges on that. We noted that the against team made more arguments for why it shouldn't be governments instead of why it should be businesses. We were respectfully not asked to come up with new laws. We were asked to argue who should be responsible. And when we are talking about a pandemic of this magnitude, we need to rely on the institutions and not scattered. We are talking about a pandemic that's going around the globe. We also noted that the against team had most US examples, and the situation in the US is dire. But the world is bigger than that. It is a pandemic. We need strong, orchestrated effort. And it's not just legal. It's not just about the laws. We didn't bring any props, by the way. We didn't need that. But it's education, it's awareness, it's in the education system, it's in the health system, it's in the legal system, it is businesses, but only government can lead that. So being responsible must lie there, because else it will be company by company. Of course, when you have a legal system, companies have to address by that. But we also know that one of the reasons why many of the legislative things are being watered out is lobbyists from the private sector that are lobbying not to have the right laws on the books. So I don't need more time, but you gotta vote for it.
Bravo.
Well done.
Now the against side.
Yes. We meet again, Ms. Katja. Judges, thank you very much for the great guidelines and the great thoughts that you had about our presentation. The great equalizer for businesses is social media. Why do I say that? Because social media gives everyone the opportunity to speak up and say what you're doing, businesses, are wrong. And we can take a look at so many examples. In the Me Too movement, Harvey Weinstein went far too long, for many years, where he was allegedly, and in many times it's been confirmed through witness testimony, I'm just being a lawyer up here, where that he had been abused women. And it didn't come forward. And when it did, when that Me Too movement began on October 5th of 2017 and continued to engulf, and it will continue to for years to come, his business went bankrupt. Why? Because social media took it by a storm. People spoke up and spoke loud. And that's the huge difference. And this is why businesses have the ability, and frankly, have to self-regulate. Because if they don't, there's a catastrophic response when you do the wrong thing in this day and age. Judge, you had also mentioned how should government be involved in businesses? Government can bring forward guidelines. Not necessarily laws, but use the laws that are on the books and say, look, there's a law that prohibits sexual harassment, gender inequality. You need to do better, businesses. What do you do then? Set forth the guideline and say, you have to provide training for your entire workforce. Make sure that your workforce knows what the laws are, there to comply with it. And under that guideline, it becomes a standard of the industry, and companies will look to each other and say, if I don't do it, I will lose market share. It will continue by wave. So therefore, respectfully, we ask that let the businesses self-regulate and vote no. Thank you.
All right.
I hope everyone's awake because, I mean, you should be anyway, but this is your moment, audience. Firstly, I want us all to please thank these amazing speakers and our jury as well. And now, this is your big moment. We're going to move it to a vote. So I'm going to ask you to please clap if you believe that the for side made a stronger case. And you can go ahead and do it now.
All right. And I'm going to ask you to vote now if you think the against team make a stronger case. Well,
hold on. We need to confer the chairwomen's.
We might be split on this one. Jury, be ready to.
What? You think it's split? Should we do it again? You want to do another clap? Okay.
Sorry, we have to do it again.
Okay, so if you feel that the for side did a better job convincing you, please clap.
All right. And if you think the against team did a better case, clap now! Oh well, all right, okay. So I think by a very, very narrow margin, I think the against did it.
I think it was the 4 team, but never mind. No. It's fantastic work from everyone. It's really unbelievable. It is not easy to get up here and debate in front of your peers, in front of this huge room full of people. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all to the audience for participating. It's been absolutely fabulous. Thank you to our judges over there. Your comments were insightful.
Thank you.
And on to the next thing. Onwards and upwards. Thank you so much.